Welcome to Women We Should Know with international speaker, mindset reset mentor, author, and your host, Leslie Michaels. With audacious honesty and candor, the Women We Should Know podcast presents the wisdom and life-empowering insights of women who are the embodiments of innovation and social evolution. Please join Leslie as she shares potent conversations that will inspire your personal and professional evolutions. Welcome to Women We Should Know.
Welcome back to Women We Should Know, the podcast where we consistently bring you the voices and the tenacity of women who are challenging status quo, shattering the old paradigms, women who do not color inside of the lines and who do not climb in boxes created by other people. I will tell you, it is my esteemed honor today, during Women's History Month, to bring to you a most amazing woman who has been carving new pathways and leading the light on for all of us for a very long time. Nancy Hollander is an internationally recognized U.S. criminal defense attorney. She is also an associate tenant at London's Doughty Street Chambers and of counsel to a significant law firm in Geneva. Ms. Hollander has been admitted to practice in the U.S. Supreme Court, that's no small thing, federal, state, and military courts. She is also on the list of counsel for the ICC as well as the DOJ pool of qualified civilian defense counsel for military commissions. For more than 4 decades, Ms. Hollander's practice has largely been devoted to representing individuals and organizations accused of crimes, including those involving national security issues in trial and on appeal. She was lead appellate counsel for Chelsea Manning, and she won Ms. Manning's release in 2017 when President Obama commuted her sentence from 35 years to 7 years. Ms. Hollander has also represented 2 prisoners at Guantanamo Bay Naval Base, and in 2016, she won the release of one of them, Mohamedou Ould Slahi, who had been incarcerated for 14 years without charge. His story is chronicled in his New York Times best-selling book, Guantanamo Diary, which Ms. Hollander helped facilitate and publish in a feature film, Mauritanian, in which she was portrayed by Jodie Foster. In addition to her criminal defense practice, Ms. Hollander has been counsel in civil cases, forfeitures, and administrative hearings, and she has argued and won a historic case involving religious freedom in the U.S. Supreme Court. Ms. Hollander has also served as a consultant to the defense in international cases. She has created and taught in hundreds of trial practice programs in the U.S., internationally in Russia, Sweden, the U.K., Portugal, Switzerland, France, and for lawyers practicing in international criminal tribunals. She has also written extensively and conducted more than 200 seminars and presentations around the globe on various subjects, including the securing of evidence in international cases, forfeiture, illegal search and seizure, expert witnesses, defense of child abuse cases. Oh, now listeners know that that's something I'm all about. Ethics, evidence, and trial practices. In 1992 through 93, Ms. Hollander was the first woman president of the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. Ms. Hollander has also received many professional awards. Among them, in 2001, she was named one of America's top 50 women litigators by the National Law Journal. Miss Hollander's full CV can be found at www.fbdlaw.com. Nancy, it is a privilege and an honor to have a woman who has made way for all of us in profound ways and have you on the show today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And happy birthday.
Well, thank you for that too, although at this age, I don't know if I count them anymore.
When we were speaking earlier, you said something that really spoke to me that I would like to visit. You said, we, referring to women, have the power. We just have to assert it. What do you mean by this, and how would you invite women to assert their power?
I'm the child of a woman who was extremely successful as a businesswoman in the 1950s, when there weren't very many. She taught me to do whatever I wanted to do in the world, but to do it as a woman. She never went out of the house without lipstick, even to put out the garbage. So, to start with, I was raised with that. What I mean is exactly that. Women have been powerful throughout the ages. Unfortunately, it's the men who write the history. And as my friend Mohamedou says, until the lion learns to ride, it is the hunter who will write the history. We have let men write that. Yeah, I do too. And it really speaks to me. It's an African proverb, because we've let men write the history. Well, when men write the history, we get forgotten, but we've been there all along. We've always been there. And we can take from that we do have the power. It has been asserted. We need to assert it. That's not always easy. Many women are raised to believe that women shouldn't speak up, that women have to let men be in charge. Mm-hmm. But that isn't how it has to be. Mm-hmm. There are cultures where men are in charge. There are cultures where women are in charge. Mm-hmm. But, you know, we need to step off the pedestal that perhaps we've been put on as victims and get down to the floor and assert that we're not victims. We're proud, we're strong, and we're going to assert our power. Now, that doesn't mean to be aggressive. It just means to be assertive. It means to be part of the conversation. That's more or less what I mean.
Beautiful. One of the stories I love about the way you did this, and it is a way in which all women since have been impacted. And I'll just give you a lead in, and then you can tell your own story. And that is the story of when you were a young attorney and the judge said something to the effect of, "Gentlemen, approach the bench," and you stayed in your chair.
Yes, that is what happened. There was no jury. I wouldn't have done this probably in front of a jury, but I did stay in my chair. And he said, and unfortunately, this judge is now dead, so he can't speak up for himself. But he said, "Miss Hollander," I said, "you approach the bench." And I said, "No, Your Honor, you asked the gentleman to approach the bench, and I'm not a man." He called me into his chambers, and everybody said, "Oh my God, she's in trouble now." And it was very nice. And he said, what do you expect me to do? I'm not used to having women trial lawyers. And I said, well, you could call us all gentlemen part of the week and ladies part of the week, or you could just call us all counsel. And he said, what a brilliant idea. And that's what he did.
And we all know, we've seen it either in televised trials or those fictionalized trials, that is the norm now. So kudos to you, and thank you on behalf of all women.
Well, I don't think I'm responsible for all of it. I'm responsible for that judge. But, you know, there are times like that. There was another one in federal court when a judge, and this had to have been about 1980, a judge said, do you wish to be called Mrs. or Miss? And I said to him, I don't believe you've asked the men their marital status, sir. I'd like to be called Ms. And he ruffled. But, you know, I said it nicely. Made the point.
Yes. And that's what counts. You made point. And again, thank you, because every time one of us as women speaks up in a civil but clear and unequivocal way for ourselves, we speak up for all women. So thank you for that. Now, you have had an adventurous life, Nancy. Some of it you probably would have been glad to not be put through. At one point during the 60s and the 70s, you were being followed by the FBI, the CIA, the Chicago Police Department. What was all this about?
Well, it was about being an activist, organizer, fighting with men, of course, men and women, for the rights of individuals. The Chicago Police Department were well known for some corruption. The neighborhood that I lived in, Foster Avenue police were actually fencing things out of the basement of the police department until they got caught. But they just didn't take it well. That we followed paddy wagons that arrested people, and they didn't like it, and there were reports written about us.
And how did that proceed? How did you finally bring conclusion to this, well, harassment? Quite frankly.
Yes, there was harassment, and I don't know that we brought conclusion to it. I think things are better in Chicago now in terms of corruption, but as you know, a lot of Chicago and Illinois politicians have gone to jail over the years. But we made a point in that community, I believe, and people stood up, and welfare mothers stood up for their rights. And that's what it was all about. It was about building a movement of individuals, interracial individuals. It didn't survive, I don't think, but it survived for a while. And some really good things came out of it. I think there's a healthcare center now, a clinic, and some other things that came out of that in Chicago.
You speak about the time that the government succeeded in chilling your First Amendment rights, and that this jeopardized your clients' Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendment rights. And can you tell us about that?
We filed a lawsuit. I wish I could remember exactly what year it was, but maybe you know. We filed a lawsuit, and I was one of the plaintiffs. There were organizations and other individuals. We were represented by the American Civil Liberties Union. Jamil Jaffer was our lawyer. And we argued that we believed we were being spied on by the government, surveilled, when we spoke to clients who were overseas and or witnesses, and that we had a duty to protect the confidentiality of our clients, which we have, and we can't represent them if we can't uphold that duty. It would be a violation of our it'd be a violation of the client's rights, but it's also an obligation of the lawyer, and you have to tell your bar if you cannot provide confidentiality, and therefore you probably shouldn't represent that person. Well, that's a difficult situation to be in. So we felt that we had to fly to wherever the case was, or the other lawyers were, or the witnesses were, to have a confidential conversation. We lost in the Sixth Circuit because the government said we couldn't prove it. Well, we were right, as we discovered later when Mr. Snowden said that we had been correct all along. But at the time, we couldn't prove it.
Right. And that should be sacrosanct.
Absolutely.
That should be sacrosanct.
You have to protect the confidentiality of whatever your client tells you.
Or you're defeating the entire system.
That's right.
Speaking of the entire system, you have not played small at all. How did it come to be that you expanded out from beyond Albuquerque, New Mexico, where you once started and did a lot of work, and end up in France and Portugal and Geneva and a resounding presence in the UK?
It kind of just happened. I did a lot of teaching in the U.S., teaching lawyers and law students. And somebody called me one day and asked if I'd like to train lawyers in Russia. And I said, sure. And he said, I know that you've done a lot of teaching. How long would it take you to put together a week-long program? And I said, I can have it to you this afternoon because it's in my head. I have it.
Sure.
And so we did that for several years. And then...
May I interrupt and ask you, Russia is such an enigma to Americans, and they have such a different system. What was that like for you, teaching that lot in Russia?
What we were teaching was, at that time, they started, and this was in the early 90s, they started having jury trials in Russia and in criminal cases, but the lawyers didn't know how to talk to juries. And so that's a foundation gave us the money. We met the lawyers in Russia who wanted to learn this, and we did a program where it's not a lecture program. It's a program where they have a course that they've created, basically a case that they've created. That's a Russian case. And they had to stand up and talk to the jury, and we critiqued them, and we did some demonstrations. And that's what we did during those years when that was really open. And we had a great time. Some of the Russian lawyers came to the U.S. ultimately. We stayed in touch with them. But, life is different there now, and much different than it was then. And I don't think they have any, I don't know this, but I don't think they have the jury trials anymore, or maybe not as often as they did then.
Right.
But I also got, just quite out of the blue, a request from an Irish lawyer, or a lawyer in the U.S. who was not connected to Ireland in any way, and who was an expert in cross-examination and discovery, and that went to the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, NACDL, went to the office. They said, well, contact Nancy. And they did, and I ended up representing Michael McKevitt and going to London. I couldn't be in court. I mean, I could be in court, but I couldn't actually be a barrister. They have a barrister and solicitor situation there anyway. And I worked as a consultant to the solicitor. The government of Ireland paid me, and that case went on for years. I met other people through that.
And now, Nancy,
One thing just led to another.
for individuals who don't know that name, Michael, what was his last?
McKevitt.
Yes. Who is this?
Michael McKevitt was alleged to be the quartermaster of what was known as the real IRA. Quartermaster is the one who's in charge of the weapons. And he was accused of and ultimately convicted of something called directing terrorism. It was a major case. Michael went to jail for a long time. He was released and he's ultimately died now. But the case went on. The case went on appeal. The case went up to the European Court of Human Rights. It was a long case, and I think that our lawyers did an excellent job. I think that the judges knew what they were going to do, and that's what they were going to do. And in Ireland, one of the things he was accused of was being a member of a prohibited organization, and you can be convicted on the opinion of a police officer. So, right. So that one was pretty easy for them. And he received a sentence of 20 years. The government wanted to give him 30 years, and the court said, no, he has children, and we're just going to give him 20 years. And ultimately, he had cancer. He got out a little early, and then he died at home, which was good.
Yeah, exactly. Well, in the world of international law and powerful cases, Chelsea Manning is a name that almost all Americans know.
A lot of Americans. I run into Americans who don't know who she is, but I think a lot of Americans know.
Can you talk to us about that? How you got involved, and what was most intriguing to you to provoke you to take on that case?
Well, I had been requested by someone to represent her when she was first arrested. She was in Kuwait. And then I talked to some people about it, and then she ultimately decided to hire a military lawyer and believed that that's what she needed. It was a military case, and it was a good decision. But then when it came time for her appeal, I received a letter saying, I've always wanted you to be my lawyer if I had a case on appeal, and would you be interested? And I wrote back that I wanted her to meet me, and my co-counsel, Vince Ward, who I asked to do it with me. Vince was at that time a law partner and had previously been a JAG, a Navy lawyer. And so he knew the military system certainly better than I did. And I told her we needed to come visit her before she made a decision. When we went to visit her, she was ready. We represented her on appeal. And we were still representing her on appeal when she said she wanted to apply for clemency. And I thought that was a good idea, mostly because she had a big following of supporters. And the case on appeal goes so slowly. And we wanted to keep her supporters engaged and keep the world engaged in her case. I have to tell you, I never thought it would be successful. But there it was, and I got the phone call from her. And there's a documentary about this, by the way, called XY Chelsea. It's available on Showtime. And the person who wrote that, Tim Hawkins, happened to be sitting in my office with his camera when I got the call. And he immediately picked up, and people have said, that was a reenactment, wasn't it? When you say hello, yes. Oh my God, which is what I said. And I said, no, it's not a reenactment. He was sitting in my office, when we got the news from the president's lawyer saying, I want you to know the president's commuting her sentence, and we couldn't give you advance notice like we should. We wanted to keep this secret, but if you turn on television, he's going to say it in about 2 minutes.
Oh my goodness. Was that had to be
Unbelievable.
fulfilling?
It was so fulfilling. And we had gotten some sense that it might be what was on his mind through a press conference and some other things that were said, but I didn't really believe it. And until we got her out, which was 120 days later, and under the Trump administration, we were nervous that somehow they would come up with something to keep her in. There shouldn't have been anything. We caught, would have been illegal, but then that might not have stopped them. But we went to Kansas. We were supported with a security detail. We were wearing flak jackets. We went in to get her. She got a flak jacket. We flew to an airplane and took off because Kansas is an open carry state. And there are a lot of people there who don't like Chelsea. And we were all nervous until we got on this chartered plane and flew out of there. It was incredible.
I am sure. I can't even imagine. But congratulations for you, for Obama, and for her. You went from there to representing individuals who were held without charge at Guantanamo Bay. How did that transition come to be?
Well, I actually represented Mohamedou before, Mohamedou Ould Slahi, who you're talking about.
Yes.
Before I started representing Chelsea.
Oh, I see.
And I represented him starting in 2005. Represented him for a long time. He didn't get out until 2016. So I received an email again from a lawyer who I had taught with in France, saying that he had heard from a lawyer in Mauritania, which most Americans don't realize is a country in West Africa, and that used to be a French colony. And he had received a letter from a French lawyer, from a Mauritanian lawyer who he knew. And the Mauritanian lawyer had said the family thinks that this person is in Guantanamo and is looking for someone to represent him. And I had been wanting to represent someone in Guantanamo. I really wanted to try. Well, we had found out that Guantanamo was happening somewhat after it started in 2002, 2001. And had, with another group of lawyers at NACDL, said, and we met with some military lawyers and said, we'd like to represent these people. But I wanted to do a trial. I'm a trial lawyer. I do appeals too, but I really am a trial lawyer. But there was someone who was going to trial who didn't want a lawyer, and I just kind of waited until I got this email and then talked to my partners, all of whom I must thank, because they said, go and do it. I said, I have no idea what this will cost. Said, that's why we became lawyers. Just go and do it. And it cost us, the firm, well into 6 figures in outlay of money, in addition to all the time that I spent and that Terry Duncan, who was at that time working for us, spent on this case. Ultimately, the ACLU joined us and paid for some experts, but and brought on a lawyer who helped us a great deal. But Hina Shamsi came on, but they didn't pay for us. And that's how it started. And went to Guantanamo and met Mohamedou and talked to him yesterday, and
was portrayed by Jodie Foster.
Yeah, that was a shock too. Like, really? We thought, the idea was that the book would help get him out. And I
Right.
believe it did help get him out. The fact that he had written that book, and the ACLU's work and signing petitions and everything ultimately got him out. No thanks to Obama, by the way, because Mohamedou actually won his habeas corpus case in 2009, but the government under Obama appealed. And so he sat there until he got out through a different procedure called a periodic review board, not a court, in 2016.
I see.
So, we blame President Obama for 7 more years of incarceration. But so the movie, too, was supposed to be a way for him to get out. But it kind of languished, as movies do, they very slow. And all of a sudden, it kind of came back when we found the director, Kevin MacDonald, and then he found Jodie, and then things were happening together. And I had no idea in a million years that A-list lawyer like Jodie would represent me. And she and the other actors did this for very little money because they cared about the case.
That's beautiful. That's just beautiful. Let's go back to a name you mentioned earlier, Edward Snowden. I am sure there had to be a great wave, a great sense of vindication that rippled through the legal community when he came out with all of the information about the wiretaps and all of the other information that he brought forward.
Yes. I know I contacted Jamil and said, see, we were right. We were right all along. We knew it. I've known this. I mean, I'm a child of the 60s, as you mentioned. I've always thought my phone was tapped. I say good morning to them sometimes, good morning, NSA, CIA, whoever's on there today. But for him to bring it out and prove it was incredible gratification, basically. And he did a great thing, and lost his country as a result of it. He didn't intend to go to Russia. He was on his way to Ecuador when the U.S. forced his plane down, and he ended up in Russia. That's how he ended up there. He didn't say, I want to go to Russia.
Okay, I don't understand all that detail. What he was going to...
He was on his way. He was in Hong Kong, and Ecuador had said they would grant him,
asylum?
Asylum, thank you, not amnesty, asylum. And Ecuador said they would grant him asylum. So he was flying, and the U.S. didn't allow the plane, I forget where it was, over some airspace in Europe, and the plane landed in Russia. And he was in the Russian airport for a considerable period of time, whether it was days or weeks or months, I don't remember. I've been in that airport, and I've seen people in Moscow waiting there, as you step over them to try to get to the gate, people who are living there trying to get in or out. And
really? This is common.
This was a long time ago when I saw that, but when he was there, and the U.S. took away his passport. He had no passport. He had no way to go anywhere. So, I mean, they didn't physically take it away, but
of course,
but so he ended up stuck there. And that's how he ended up there. And now he's there. He has 1, maybe 2 kids. His girlfriend joined him. The children are Russian citizens. I think he wrote recently that he wants to become a Russian citizen, so he has the same citizenship as his children. He never speaks out about the war in Ukraine, one way or the other. He speaks out about the things he always speaks out about. If you watch him on Twitter, but, he's quiet about the Russian government as well. He should be. And that's where he is. But it's not, at least if he has a citizenship, he can travel some places.
Right.
As it is now, he's a person without a country.
He's a prisoner in a sense.
And his girlfriend, took the plunge and joined him. But I'm sure he'd like to see his family. Maybe they go there and meet him. I don't know that. I'm sure if they do, it's kept very quiet.
I know I've heard or seen him say that he would happily come back if he thought he could have a fair trial.
That's right.
And that speaks volumes.
Yes, it does.
This has been fascinating, Nancy. Absolutely fascinating. I thank you. And I want all of the listeners to know I'm going to do for you what I always do for you. As I said at the beginning, I'm going to put Nancy's contact information, her law firm, on her program notes. You're going to be able to get in touch with her. So check out.
And I welcome that.
Wonderful. So when you're not driving, when you're finished jogging, check out the podcast, subscribe, like, leave a comment. And I always say, it doesn't have to be the most flattering comment. I mean, we welcome those. But what I welcome more than anything is communication. So please feel free to share whatever you would like to share. And do share.
Thoughtful disagreements are fine with me.
Yes. Be a good sister. Who do you know who would be fascinated by this conversation? Share it with her. Be a good sister. Let's start passing around and sharing wonderful information and insights. Nancy, before we close, I would like to ask you, you have a word. Let me look at my, there it is. You have a word I'd like you to explain. Hope Day.
Hope Day?
Yes, you said
my word.
Hope Day comes, there will be lawyers, not lawyers and female lawyers.
Fair. Well, I don't recall calling it Hope Day, but when I became the first woman lawyer in 1992, I wrote for the magazine, the Champion, which is the NACDL magazine. I wrote that I do hope that someday we won't say so-and-so has a lawyer and a female lawyer, and there are 10 judges on such and such a bench, and 3 of them, by the way, are women. We would just have lawyers and doctors and plumbers and veterinarians and construction workers. Now, that's the day that I am hopeful of. We are all here on this planet together, and some people got the lottery of male birth, some the lottery of female birth. We all got the lottery of living in a place where we have enough food and something over our heads, most of us. But we're on this planet together, and we all need to work together so we have a peaceful planet for the people and all the animals.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being a guest, Nancy. I appreciate your time, your wisdom, and your open sharing.
Thank you so much for having me, Leslie.
Certainly. I know that was a fascinating conversation, wasn't it, women? I probably have to replay this one again myself 2 or 3 times. And don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and please comment. And as you go through the rest of your day, please remember, you truly are stronger and wiser than you know.